Okay. So today I wanted to just start off with some practice problems using coding bat. I know, Nate, you were there last time, but we can go over them all together since it has been a little while. And then I will get started with tkinter and actually like creating GUIs basically. Um, so Deep, did you make like a coding bat account? I sent it out like a while ago, so I'm not sure if you saw that.
I don't think so. I can do that now.
Yeah, okay. It's just like codingbat.com, and then you don't really have to make an account, but it just saves all your work if you do. So yeah, but I'll share my screen. Um, yeah. So basically, we can just start out with like one of the warm-up problems. Um, and what it does is like it uses functions to run your code. So like it gives you a problem, like what the problem is, and then it gives you examples. So in this problem, it's like saying you're given two int values, so a and b, and that's what the parameters of your function are. And your function is called makes 10. So it's telling you to write a function that returns true if one of them is 10, or if the sum of a and b is 10. Does that like make sense so far, just like what it's asking?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So I kind of just wanted to do this with both of you. So like, how do you think you would start out this function? So just keep in mind that a and b are your like input values, so you can use those in your function. Like, how do you think we would start this out? It doesn't even have to be the whole problem yet.
Would we define A and B first?
So A and B are like your parameters, which means that, oh, right, okay. So basically when CodingBat runs this, it puts in like values for A and B to check if your function actually works. So right now, basically you're treating A and B as like variables. Does that make sense? Like unknown variables. So you need to like write a function that no matter what values you're given for A and B, it'll do like what's written up here.
Can you
Does that make
use
sense, or was that?
or more
Sorry,
than once? Oh, sorry.
what? What did you ask?
Can you use or more than once in a line?
Yeah, you can. You just have to do some like parentheses to separate stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, yeah, that's actually a good start. So
So then,
basically, yeah, go on.
so then, what would you do for a start? Would you have to do it in the form of a return since it's asking for a return, or
Yeah, so
would you
you
do
can
like an if statement?
yeah, you can do an if statement and then do the return inside the if. Um,
Okay.
yeah, that's probably like, or you could do it all as a return statement. I usually like to split it up just because it like looks a little bit nicer and it's easier to understand. But yeah, we can, since we have been using if statements, let's just start with that. So um, you're kind of going off of like what's in here. So like it kind of spells it out for you. So like it says if one of them is 10, so that means like if A equals 10 or B equals 10. And I usually like to put separate things in parentheses just because it's easier to read, but you don't really need to for ORs. And then, yeah, so you can do multiple ORs like that. And then like the last one would just be if A plus. Does that make sense? Where I came up with that? Yeah, so for most of the warm-up ones or like the logic problems, it kind of tries to tell you like kind of what to do. And then so inside this if we can return, so this is going to be our return true. And then usually it means like else you just return. So if I click go, it runs all these tests. So that's where it inputs like A and B values to check if what it's actually supposed to be matches like what your code outputs. And then you can also look at the solution. So usually, yeah, so like here they return it, they just return this basically. Because like this will like this is a Boolean, right? Like this whole thing here. So they're just returning that directly. So that's another way to do it.
So what's a Boolean again?
Yeah, Boolean is true or false. So like when you simplify this statement out, it's either going to be like true or false, like either A equals 10 or B equals 10 or A plus B equals 10, right? So if one of those works out, then it's going to be true. If none of them do, then it's going to be false. So it's just returning.
If you did and for the Boolean, would all of them have to be true or all of them false? All of them false if one of them's false?
Yeah. So like if we did and, that means that, well, it wouldn't work because like, you know, that means that A has to equal 10 and B has to equal 10 and A plus B has to equal 10. But you could also do like one and one or. So like if it was like A equals 10 and B equals 10, or A plus B equals 10. Does that make sense? Like that's not what the question's asking, but like if it were, then you could do that. But
yeah,
you'd
that
have
makes
to make
sense.
sure. Yeah. When you use multiple ones, usually you want to use parentheses to group them. Like with ands, especially, you want to group them with parentheses because then sometimes it like gets a little bit messed up with like how Python like interprets it. So yeah, sometimes if it's not giving you the answer you're expecting, just try to add parentheses and it'll probably fix it.
Okay.
Yeah. Any questions on this one? All right, cool. And then let's try to do one of the warm-up twos because they have loops on them. So okay, let's do this one. So you're given like a string as an input and it wants you to return a string that's like the first letter, or yeah, the first letter, the first two letters, first three, so on until the end. I don't think I went over this, but strings act like lists. So, okay, hold on. I'm gonna stop sharing and share the whiteboard instead. Wait, oh, can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And you can see what I just drew, because sometimes you have to like.
Yep.
It loaded on the screen for. Oh, there we go.
Yeah. Okay. So the word that they have is like. Oh god. Okay. Is code, right? So strings kind of act like lists. So we can kind of write them like put each one in a little box and like each letter, and each of these has a position. So if you're like, if our string is like assigned to a variable, I think, let's see, in this problem, it's like the parameter is called str. So basically in the first example that they're giving str equals code. Then each letter of our string has a position, just like we do in lists. So the first one is 0, and then 1, 2, 3, and then so on for like however long our string is. And that also includes spaces. So if there was a space in our string, that would have its own separate like position. So for example, if we wanted to get like the very first letter, then that would be str 0, like with square brackets. And if we wanted like a range of letters, like let's say we wanted these two, it would also be similar to strings where it's like str, and then you do the starting one, so that would be 1. And then the ending one plus 1, so it would go to 3, because then it excludes 3, so you only get like that equals OD. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of how we're gonna do this problem, just like as a hint, because I don't think I went over that with strings earlier. And then just it also uses a loop because you don't know how long your string is. So do either of you guys have like guesses on how to start this problem? Or like a rough idea of what you would do? All right, so usually for string problems, when you're returning like a different string from like your input one, you want to like make a separate one so that you can add to it. So like an empty string. So I'm just going to call mine X, and to make an empty string, you just do like empty quotes. And basically what we'll do is we'll add to it. So we'll just add like in every loop, we'll add one more, like the next what's it called, like section. So it'll be like C and then CO and then COD, and or like, you know, whatever it is for that string. So I'm just using the code one as an example. And then that's when you would start your loop. So let me open up, I think it was the second one, maybe. Okay. Okay. So when we did loops, one of them that we did was the range one. So the range one basically creates a bunch of numbers here, and we did this one too that was like the range of the length of a list. So it's like the range is creating this 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 for this 5-number list, or sorry, 5-item list. And then you can do like the name of the list and then the index in here using your range, like the numbers in range. Did you guys remember that or go over that?
A little bit.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so we're gonna kind of do the same thing, but instead of a list, it's gonna be a string. So if I do like for I in range, and then you can also do like len, and then our string is called str. So that's going to be the length of our string. So for code, for example, that's going to go like this thing is going to loop 4 times, which makes sense, right? Because this has 4 sections. It's like the C, CO, COD, CODE. Yeah. Okay. And then we want it to output like every time a certain section of our like like first it just wants 1 letter and then 2 and then 3 and then 4. So the way that we add to a string is just do x plus equals, and then it'll add to the end of our string. So right now, like when we start, it's empty, and then we'll just start adding to it. And then we can just add, like basically it's going to be like a section of our string. So str, and we always want it to start at the beginning. So our start is 0, and then our end, so our end right now we'll put I in there because I is going to increase each time. So basically every time it'll take like a greater section of our string. Does that make sense? And add that to our empty one.
So you don't have to do like I+1 or anything like that?
Yeah, I was gonna say, so you, yeah, the way that you have to do it right now, if you think about it, so like for the code example, it would be in range 4, right? Which means that your list that it creates is 0. Here, let me just write it as a comment. So range creates a list that is basically 0, 1, 2, 3, because the length of our word is 4. And so if we do 0 to 0, that's going to be nothing. Like there's nothing there because it excludes 0. And 0 to 1 is just C, 0 to 2 is CO, and 0 to 3 is CODE. So, or sorry, COD. So we don't have the last one. So yeah, you're right, actually, you caught that. So we do need it to be I+1 so that it just goes like C, CO, and so on. Yeah. And then at the very end, we just return X because that's our string that has everything in it. Does that make sense? Or do you guys have any questions on that? Yeah, so if you run it, like looks like that. So if we didn't have this I+1, it would just, yeah, it like stops 1 short of what you actually need.
So I had a question just about the loop, I guess. Since we didn't really code anything to make it loop, I guess, does the warm-up like do it by itself? Like loop
like what do you mean?
times? Like so it has to loop through like 4 times, right, to get what it wants, like the C, CO, COD, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it loops through until there's 4 cases, right?
Yeah.
I'm explaining this right, but
Yeah, I know.
yeah, okay.
So like the loop is controlled by this range function, or yeah, this range. And range creates, it's like range is based on the length of our string. So it's going to loop just enough times for however long this string is. Like code is going to loop 4 times because it has 4 letters in it. ABC is going to loop 3 times because it has, oh wait, yeah, because it has 3 letters and so on. So it'll be like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. All right, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. All right. Okay, so I just wanted to give you guys like a little bit time to get a little bit more familiar with this, but like I said, it's a really good website to do coding practice, and I think all the warm-ups I think have solutions, so you can kind of see what it's doing. Yeah, this is pretty much like exactly what we did. So it doesn't try to match up the code. It tries to match up like your output. So your code doesn't have to be the same, but yeah. So I wanted to spend the rest of the time with tkinter. So let me go. So yeah, go ahead and make a new REPL, and then this time instead of putting Python as the language, go ahead and make it tkinter. So you'll see the logo is still in Python because it is like still in Python, but we're using like tkinter as a package, and Replit just does it like this differently. And I'll just call this. I think this is. Yeah. And it'll look a little bit different this time. Okay, so yeah, once it loads up, it'll already have stuff in it, which is just kind of like the starting stuff for tkinter. Why is this going on? Okay, this is just like the default starting stuff for tkinter that someone input into Replit. But if you run it, it's actually going to run this code and it'll look a little bit different. So your little screen will pop up because, yeah, when you use tkinter, it's like you're setting your own window and like how big it is and what it says. So it'll, like, if we were using it in like an IDE like PyCharm or something, or we made like in kind of like an application out of this, it would pop up in its own window. But since we're using Replit, which is online, it just kind of shows up on the side. So yeah, you'll see like, so wait, okay, let me know once you guys both have that up, like have a file that looks like this.
I have mine up.
Same.
All right, perfect. So yeah, I'll just go over like what's in here right now, and then we'll start adding stuff to it to like kind of play around with it. So you'll see if I like move this down, you can see this whole window here. That's what it looks like. So the very first line says import like tkinter as tk. So when you import packages, you usually just do import and then the name of the package. Like I think, yeah, one time you use import math. So it's just like import tkinter. And then the as tk is just so that like every time you use a tkinter function, you have to say like tkinter dot like whatever the function is. Like over here, you would have to say that every single time here. But if you say as tk, then it kind of helps you abbreviate it. So now every time you have to type out tkinter, you can just type out tk. And it just, you don't need to do it, but it just makes it easier. So the first thing that it's doing is it's creating a window. So to do that, you just do tk.tk. And then we can set the window title. So they said hello world, but they spelled it wrong. And you can set the window geometry. So that's 300 by 300. And that just creates this window here. And then next they have like hello equals tk.label. So we're creating a label now. And the text in the label is just hello world. And then basically, so if I comment, I'll comment out this line here. So if I get rid of the .pack one, it doesn't show up anymore. So that's like pretty important. So this just kind of creates a label, but it doesn't like put it on your window until you do .pack. So sometimes like if I wanted to, for example, like let's say I created this label and then I created, this is like the same thing, but a button. Let's say I created the label first, but I want the label to go under the button. Then I can just do like the .pack, like hello.pack under the button .pack. And that'll show up like this now. So you'll have a button and then your other like label. And then if I like click on this, this isn't going to do anything right now, but we'll go over kind of how to code that. And then the last thing is that we have this tk.main loop. So that just kind of starts the main loop. So you'll see how this code is still running, even though like the window's not really doing anything. Basically, the main loop helps, it'll come more in use later, but it'll help detect like button clicks. So like if I click this, I can detect that, but I need that main loop there. And also like keyboard types, key presses, stuff like that. So basically the important thing to remember is like you start with this kind of, so you import tkinter, you create a window, you can give it a name and a size, and then the very last thing you want to do is do tk.main loop. And then everything in between is like kind of coding what labels, buttons, and whatever are on your window. So So far, any questions on that? All right, cool. So I'm gonna move this pack. Let me click stop first. Okay. Back up here. So first, let's kind of play around with that label. So some functions like label button. So if I hover over a label, it shows like kind of these things, which probably they actually don't really mean much to me either. But basically what it means is that you can customize all the options for this label. And since there's a lot of different things you could do, like you can add the text color, the background color of the label, like the width and the height of like the size of it, all that stuff. What we can do is actually, if we go right at the very beginning of those parentheses, right after label, and we press enter, it'll kind of let us like type it on separate lines just so it's not cluttered. So we'll leave the text as the same thing. And if you do a comma after that, you can do each one on a new line if you want. That's what I like to do because it's more organized. So I could do like background equals white. And it recognizes like certain colors as like what they are. So it already has it stored. So when you type white, it knows what it is. And then the text color is actually foreground. And I'll make that red. And you can also do the width. So I'll just do width equals 10 and height equals 10. Yeah, so once I have that, like I have all these options here. If I click run, now my label will look different. So one of the things that you might have noticed is like I have my width and height both as 10 right now, but my height is like a lot bigger. And that's because for some reason, tkinter uses like text height. So the width is like 10, how do I explain this? So it's based on the number like 0. So the text height and width of the number 0. So the width 10 would mean like I can fit 10 zeros in here side by side. And then the height 10 means I can fit like 10 rows of zeros like stacked on top of each other. So that's why it's longer, like the height is longer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little weird, just something to keep in mind if you're sizing stuff. Obviously you'll like be testing, so you won't have to worry too much about it, but if I just do height as 1 and rerun it, then it'll look kind of more like a normal label. But yeah, so that's kind of how you customize it. Also, since the background and foreground are like kind of annoying to type, it also recognizes if you just do BG and FG for those, and it still knows what it means. Yeah. All right, so we can basically do the same thing for the button too. So I'm going to press enter for that one too, and then I'll do. Also, you can put them in any order. So like, I do foreground equals blue. Background equals yellow. Also, if you just don't, like let's say I just didn't change the background, it would just default to the one it is right now. I'll do width equals and height equals 3 or something. And basically it'll just run it. Yeah, and now it has like a bigger button. I can still click it. Yeah, so these things like labels and buttons are what we call widgets. And And it's just basically things that we're adding to our screen to like that people can interact with. So these are two of them. And then the third one that you'll see a lot is entry boxes. So those are like text boxes that people can type into. And you can also control it from like in your code so that it like clears, or like you can add entry to it. But most of the time you're probably going to be taking in like user input from that. So again, it's kind of made the same way. Before we do that, I just want to point out like these, like the label, the button variables, that can be named like whatever you want. This is just like the automatic one. So let's say for this entry, I'll just, okay, I'll just call it like E. So to make an entry, we just do tk.entry with a capital E. And then again, we can like customize all this. So I'll do text equals, oh wait, actually usually entries don't have text already in them, but you could do that. So I'm gonna leave that empty. I'll just say like the width equals 20 and the background is going to be, I'm just picking random colors. And then we want to make sure that we pack it. So we just do e.pack. What's the issue? Okay, I don't know why I was doing that, but yeah, so now you have like, it looks kind of weird here, but if I click on it, it like has my cursor on it and I can type in there. If I press enter, nothing happens, but we can use like events and stuff like that to actually let our program like take an input from like user entry like that. So do you guys so far like have any questions on this, or having any issues with your code?
So just to make sure, I guess again, every time we use the pack function, that displays it in the window.
Yeah, so it does it in order of like how you list them. So yeah, so hello comes first, button comes second, and then entry comes third.
All right, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that it just basically, I think they did it that way so that it like doesn't automatically appear, so you can create like buttons and stuff beforehand and then add them in like later, depending on the order you want them in. Okay, so now we'll kind of do like event handling, and like how to actually get or do stuff with buttons. Okay, so for event handling, we need to like create, we have to write a function for it. So functions, you just want to make sure that they come before you use them, because if I like define it down here, it's not going to know what I'm talking about. So usually like you could put them in a different file, but I'm just going to do it like right here in the middle of my code. So I'll just do a few enters. So I'm going to do like def, which is how you start the function, and I'll call this like button clicked. So this is basically going to do something when the button is clicked, like that button that says click me. And then in parentheses, I'm just going to type event. So it's taking in an event, which is like basically if the button is clicked. And all I'm going to do in here is say what I want to do. So I'm just going to print something like the button was clicked. So let me know once you guys have that.
Yep, I'm good.
I'm good.
All right, perfect. So now that we have our like function definition, we want to call our function. And the way that we call it is we're using something called bind. So it's like connecting our button to this function so that when that button is clicked, it calls this function. So we use the button, so the name of our button, which here is just button, and then we do dot bind. And then in the parentheses, in the parentheses, the first thing we do is we put like our event that's happening. So we wanted to do when someone like basically left clicks it, and that event, we'll go over these more next time too, but for left clicking, the event is called button-1, and it like you type it in like, forgot what those are called, the little arrow things. Like that, so it knows what event it's expecting. And then you do the name of your function, so button clicked. So now that I have that, I can run it. So now if I click my button in my console, it should actually show up like what I was, yeah. And you can even use that, like if you want to check, like for some reason, check how many times the button was clicked, you can have a variable that keeps track of that basically. And then every time you just add 1, so it just like prints out that number or something. So that's what it should look like right now when you click that button. So far, any questions, or did that work for both of you guys?
Yeah, it works for me.
All right.
Mine work.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, that's kind of how you handle like mouse, like what's it called? Like people right-clicking on stuff. So what we're gonna do now is try to use like all 3 of these widgets to have someone enter their name in. So let's see. Okay, yeah, I'll just do it down here. I'm gonna, for now, I'm just gonna comment everything out so it's not like annoying. When it loads, where's that? So we already have like our window created. I'm gonna put, I'll just like type out a comment what we're gonna do. So first we'll use a label to show like what they're gonna type. So basically like type name here. And then we're gonna make a like text box or an entry box for a user to type their name. And we'll do, right now we haven't gotten to like doing keyboard detection yet, so we'll just use a button for them to press enter. And we'll have it print out on the console like your name is something. So print your name, whatever they type in basically. All right, so the first thing we want to do is make our label. So I'll call this one like name label equals, so we do tk.label. And I'm not, for this one, I'm just not going to do any of the extra settings. So I'll just make it like text equals enter your name or your name here. And then I can do the pack right now, or I can do it later. So I'll just do it all, like do all 3 of them at the end. So right now I'll make the entry box. So I'll do name entry equals tk.entry. And then since I don't want to change any of the parameters for this, like the size of it or anything. I'm just going to leave it as it is, like that, without any options. And then last, I'm just going to have an enter button, so I'll just call that enter and make a button that just says enter. So if I run this right now, it won't show up. So I'm going to do all the packs right now and just make sure all those show up. Pack. And then I can change any of the options if I want to. Yeah, so it just looks like that. We haven't like coded it yet so that any of the buttons actually do anything, but we'll get to that in a second. So far, do you guys have like this part, or you're still working on it?
I'm still working on it.
Yeah, okay. Just let me know once you get it.
I'm good.
All right. You guys are both good?
Yep, I'm good too.
All right. Okay, so now we have our widgets, and now we basically want to define our like event and like the function for that. So to handle the event. So these functions are called like event handlers. So I'll call this one get name or name. And then again, our parameter is just called event. So this is basically when they press enter, it'll like print out like your name is. So first we have to actually get the name from our entry box. And the way that we can do that is we can use one of the functions, like the built-in functions for tkinter is called .get. And it basically gets like whatever's in the entry box. So like at the time of the event, which is like when you click enter. So if we can set that to a variable. So let's make a variable called name. And then we put the name of our entry box, which is name entry, and then do .get. So name is going to be set to whatever is inside our entry box when enter is clicked. So now we have this variable called name. So now we can print something out. So I'm just going to print out that your name is, and then add strings together, you just put like plus and then our variable name. Right, and so like right now if we run that, so yeah, it looks the same. And if I type in my name and do enter, oh yeah, okay, so it doesn't do anything yet because we didn't actually call this function. So we didn't use like the .bind thing, so we still have to do that. But yeah, let me know once you guys have this function down, or if you have any questions so far about this.
I'm all set.
Okay.
I'm good.
All right, so the last thing we need to do is do like our button.bind. So here our button is called enter, so I'll do enter.bind. And then again, since it's just like a left click, I'll just do the button one thing. And then the name of my function, which is print name. So now that should actually work. If I do that. Yeah. And if I change this, if it's empty, it'll still print it out as like nothing. Yeah, let me know once that is working for you guys.
Yeah, I got it to work.
All right.
Mine's good.
All right, cool. So you'll notice like if I type in like something here and I press enter, this thing is still here. So you can't type in like new entries. Well, you can, but you just have to backspace it. And like I mentioned earlier, you can actually control what's happening in the entry box like from here. So you can like make it say stuff in the entry box, or you can delete stuff from the entry box, which you normally really wouldn't want to do. But in this case, like one thing you would use it for is like to delete what's in there after someone presses enter. So we can actually do that by saying, or like we'll put this inside our function. So after you press enter and it prints your name out, we just want it to delete what's in there. So we type the name of our entry box. So name underscore entry, and then do dot delete. And then inside of parentheses, we say like how much of it we want to delete. So we say the start, so it's a string in there. So we say like the start and the end of it, basically. So the starting point, like if we only wanted to delete like part of it for some reason, we could do that, but most likely you wouldn't need to. So the start would be 0. And then the end, you can do tk.end in all caps, and that will like automatically detect the end of like whatever's in your entry box and delete like everything from 0 to the end. So now if I try that, I type my name and then enter, yeah, and then it deletes it out from there. And let me know once you guys got that working.
Mine's all good.
Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna click stop, and yeah, so do you guys have any questions about like tkinter so far, or like anything we went over today, or also like things that you're interested in learning about it?
So is there any way to put this to a browser, or do you need another language to be able to network it?
I'm not sure actually. I think it's like, I think you would kind of download it more like as an application, but there probably is a way to actually, yeah, it seems like that seems like a JavaScript thing. Usually use JavaScript to create like a browser like GUIs like this kind of. So yeah, I'm not sure. I can look into that though, because that would be nice to have online.
So when you download it, how do you export it, or can you export it from here?
There should be a way. I honestly haven't used this like outside of an IDE before. Like I've always run it from inside, so I'm not completely sure. But yeah, I do want to figure that out before like our last workshop, so that like people can do that with like our final project thing that we'll make. So yeah, I will check that though.
Can you just explain the dot bind again? Like what it
Yeah.
does?
So the dot bind, basically it's binding your widget to a function. So basically it's saying like when this widget is interacted with, then it'll execute like this function. So what it's doing is like you have the name of your widget. So in this case, it's my button, my enter button that I made. And then this first thing here is that event. So like our function takes in an event. And events are basically like any kind of user input. So it can be like, we'll go over this next time, but it can be like keyboard presses. And this one is just says button 1. So that means that's basically a tkinter defined button 1 as like your left click button. So like we're saying that the event that we're looking for is a left click on this enter button. So when that happens, then it'll execute this function called print name. So it'll do everything inside here.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions or anything? All right, I'm gonna stop sharing. All right, so yeah, that was kind of like a basic overview of like mainly widgets. And we'll go over, so next time, I think, yeah, on Thursday, we'll go over more like how to organize it, because right now it's all like stacked, and we obviously want something that looks a little bit nicer than that. So we'll go over that, and then also like more events. So like if you want keyboard presses, so instead of having like an enter button, you can just press enter on your keyboard instead. And then for like next week, for our last workshop, we'll do like kind of more like a project kind of thing that's more applicable. So it's not just like making random buttons and stuff like that. So yeah, but as usual, I'll send out like the recording and the code so you guys can look over it more too. Yeah, that's all I have for today.
Thank you.